This is Colt Hamilton here with Hamilton Native Outpost. Today we're going to look at a diverse native grassland, how it's good for your cattle, how it's good for soil health, how it's good for wildlife. We're going to do a little bit on management and how to establish these. So come along with us. So what is a diverse native grassland, you might be asking yourself? This is a diverse native grassland. We planted a lot of multiple different species here. There's forage here, there's cool season grasses, there's warm season grasses, all planted together. That's what we're calling diverse native grassland. And it's May the 7th, and let's take a look at some of what we've got planted here. So here in front of me, there's a lot of diversity. I'm sure you can't see it all, but there's sedges here. We're up, 14, 16 inches tall on these sedges. There's a sawtooth sunflower, which is a forb. There you've got cool seasons here, which are, a lot of these are the rye, the sedges. I see some smaller forbs down here coming on in. The point is we've got a lot of cool season here for things to be grazing already. And this is really quality. This is really lush, ready to graze stuff. Then if you look real close down in here, I can find there's some eastern gamma grass here coming on, and some big blue stem over here. And this is early in the year for them. They're just now coming up, getting greened up, getting ready to go. So as this cool season stuff starts to fade out, the warm season stuff starts to come on and fill its place. These sunflowers, they're gonna get 6 to 8 foot tall. The big blue stem will have blades of grass up to my waist, up about this tall. So there's just a whole lot here right now, and then as the year progresses along, there's a whole lot more quality coming on. So there's these phases of growth that we talk about, and phase 1 is kind of when they're getting going. They're feeding off the root system and they're not ready to really graze yet. Phase 2, they get a lot of leaf going, and when they get a lot of leaf, they're photosynthesizing, they're putting energy back into the roots. There's a lot of quality and a lot of quantity during phase 2 of growth. So you want to try to keep your plants in phase 2 of growth as long as you can. Phase 3 of growth is after phase 2, when you start to go reproductive. Once plants start to go reproductive, put up a seed head, the quality starts to go down. The quantity is still there, but the quality starts to go down. So with that being said, as you graze, if you take a bite off a plant, and we remove quite a bit of the forage here, I pulled that up a little deep, but if I was to cut it off right there, and we took about that much off with our cow, and we left about half of the rest of the plant, we could keep that in phase 2 of growth longer because it's got to regenerate. So we find this diverse native grassland here with what we've got to be about 2 times as productive as our conventional pastures, and a lot of pastures around here conventional was fescue pastures. We haven't fed any hay here for 30 years. So if you get a chance, come out to our field day and see what we mean by that. But we've been able to do this with warm season, cool season grass, all mixed together, and we do it without any fertilizer. You heard me right earlier, we can do this without any fertilizer, and we can even build soil health at the same time. Let's look at some of the reasons why. So there's a thing called nutrient cycling, and that if you let the nutrients leach down through shallow rooted plants, then it gets out of the rooting zone and they can't get it anymore. Here we've got all sorts of plants. We've got big deep rooted plants. That big blue beside us have roots go 5 foot deep here in the ground. It's a lot of shallow rooted plants. The big ones can bring it back up as they rot, decay, or get grazed off in the manure. The nutrients cycle back through the shallow rooted ones. Another thing is we've got a lot of thatch on the ground. This is stuff the cattle knocked down last fall, and underneath it you can see we've got this really loose organic-y soil. That's from the decomposition of these plants that have been knocked down, and decomposition is a good thing. That keeps that nutrient starting again on top. It's starting to head down through, and that soil is loose. It's ready to take in water, infiltrate water. It's got a lot of organic matter in it to hold that water. The other thing that we got going on with the moisture and keeping plants in the stage 2 of growth for longer, we make a lot of mycorrhizal fungi. And mycorrhizal fungi is like an extension to the root. It's funguses that grow like hairs off the end of the roots. They connect plants together underground like an underground network, and they can share nutrients from one plant to another by moving it through this fungi. The fungi gets what it needs from the plants. It gets sugars for energy from the plants, and in return it'll actually break down minerals that are stored where the plant can't use it. It can break it down and bring it to the plant, so it makes nutrient acquisition and sharing possible. Another thing, that all the thatch on the ground, as the rain falls, we've got this thatch. It has to run through all this just like a mulched garden before it can get down to the stream. So it really slows the movement of water down and allows it time to go into the pores. And with that loose organic matter, it soaks it right up. And with the roots going 5 feet deep, and they're dead and they're dying, as they regrow and just the succession of life, there's all these tunnels, and we'll take water down really deep into the soil, and we're able to store it there from the dead, dying roots, making long-term organic matter to store that within the soil for later. So that thatch we talked about earlier, that's really not wasted forage. I mean, this was knocked down by the cattle last year onto the ground so it could start rot, decompose. This keeps the ground covered. It also gives your microbes a home to live in. The microbes that break this down are very important to soil health, and you need to take care of them and you need to feed them. Speaking of microbes, let's talk about some of the bigger wildlife. Wildlife, from deer, turkeys, rabbits, bees, butterflies, you get the idea. All of them need food, water, and shelter. The water here, it's already close enough. So we're going to focus more on the other two. The shelter I'm talking about could just be clumps of grass left from last year. Last year's growth is still standing. And that happens naturally in the diverse native grasslands. The cattle don't knock it all down or graze it all. So it works out good. It's already here. The food I'm talking about is a continuous food source. It keeps going all year long. And a big part of how we do that is with the grazers. The big grazers I'm talking about were bison and elk. They've been removed from the landscape, and we could bring them back and reintroduce them, or we could just use the livestock we already have, our cattle that we count on and depend on. And to do that, if you want to graze well for wildlife, you got to keep things regenerative. You don't want to just set stock, just put cattle in here and not take them out. That doesn't actually leave anything for the wildlife to graze. If you rotate though across it, there are constantly new shoots, new vegetation regrowing that the deer browse on, then all the way down to your bugs that eat the new foliage that the quail eat in return, and other birds. So there's nesting prairie birds, there's rabbits out here, there's food for hawks. It's all here in one spot. And the other thing that it does is you graze off blooms. It makes the plants bloom at different times, prolongs that bloom period for a longer part of the year, which is very important for bees and butterflies, hummingbirds, those type of animals. The longer we can keep it successionally blooming, the better. We don't want to overgraze our pasture, but what we're looking to do is let some of the plants go to seed every now and then. So this happens fairly easily. As they get too mature, the cattle select around them. Unless you push your cattle really hard, they won't eat those anyway. So it's fairly easy to do. Another way we do it that works real good with wildlife is if you set 1/10 of your planting aside a year to let it go full season, make it seed. That provides a lot of structure and a lot of hiding places for wildlife while letting your plants make seed and letting them reproduce themselves. If you do that, you need to remove that growth with your cattle, either by grazing it in the fall after frost, or you can remove it by burning it in the overwinter before spring or early spring. Now, if you're going to do that kind of grazing and you set aside 10%, that's kind of an inconvenience. We like to look at that also as a drought plan. If you have a drier year than you planned, you run out of forage, you're better off to graze that 10%. Put it in rotation. It's already been stockpiled growing up. It should be pretty good quality stuff in the summertime there. So we recommend you use that instead of just hammering the rest of your area harder and harder. We think you'll have a better outcome. So we talked about the 1/10%. What about the other 9/10? Grazing a DNG and managing one is relatively simple. There are a few guidelines we want to go over. First, we don't mind if you graze it hard. We don't mind if you graze it light. We just don't want to graze it the same way each time. We need to rotate, always do rotational grazing. We don't want to do set stock pasture with our animals. We want to rotate in and rotate out, or rotate across it, depending on the size of your planting and the number of cattle you're using, whichever seems more appropriate. This pasture here that you're looking at, this diverse native grassland, was grazed about 18 days ago. It was grazed moderately hard, and our regrowth has already come back quite a bit. You can see the height of it there. So it's growing back. It bounces back pretty quick. It's not quite ready to graze again yet, we feel like, but probably in another 15 days or so it'll be back up where it was before. We want to have rest periods of 30 days or longer, depending upon the timing of the year and how hard you grazed it last time or how hard you're going to graze it this time. The less hard you graze it, the sooner you can come back. The harder you graze it, give it a little longer rest period. The reason we want to change when we graze and how hard we graze each year is we don't want to favor one plant diversity group over another, making that one strong and dominant over the others. It's a balance. So as you mix it up, nature's very adaptable and she'll put the right plants there. You just got to give her the ability to change a little bit. Another management tool we want to talk about today is burning. So burning is something we recommend you do every so often, about every 3 to 4 years, or burn a third to a quarter of your planting every year. This here's buckbrush. There's also some persimmon sprouts, some oak sprouts, a few locust sprouts, all that. They always encroach in on your plantings, and burning resets back, kills the top, makes them come back from the roots. That what grows back is actually pretty vegetative, and a lot of times livestock will feed on it for the first year or two. So it keeps those from taking over your plantings. Another benefit of burning is it kind of burns some of that hard to break down thatch that's on the ground or last year's growth. What that does is turns it into ash. Ash has a lot of minerals and nutrients in it, which the grass then, it puts it back into nutrient cycling. Grass takes it up. It makes it grow a little bit better that year. Your rate of gain picks up a little bit. It's just better quality stuff. However, you don't want to overdo your burning. You don't want to burn every year all the time. That would favor certain diversity groups over others. So spread it out. Another thing it does, with that thatch being gone, it gives you a little bit of bare ground there in the spring. And that allows that your seeds that are in the soil to start to germinate. They come on, get a good start, they're getting sunlight, and it keeps that diversity that you planted going on into the future. So we talked a lot about the pros of diversity. Now let's talk about how we establish diversity. Establishment. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. First, let's talk a little bit about where you can establish diverse native grasslands. We've got a woodland background here. We can actually take some of your non-productive woodlands or some logged off property, and we can turn that into a diverse native grassland that's just great for wildlife. They call those silvopastures. We can also do open fields that was in some other permanent fescue, or even crop fields that was in annual rotation crop. Any of those can be turned into diverse native grassland. But how do you get there? So for a diverse native grassland, we've got several different models worked up that we've worked through of how to convert from where you are into a diverse native grassland. Those are posted on our website, and feel free to call us. We'll talk to you about which is the best option for your goals and where you're starting from, so that we can select the best plan to work through for you.